Hello everyone, and welcome to Challenge 2, the Trial of the Trades. This board is a 12 by 12, which is one space larger than an 11 by 11 from the last trial, and as such, there is no center row because there's two spaces in the center. As you can see, those two spaces are flipped instead of mirrored, just like the last one, as all of these will be flipped, not mirrored. The non-symmetry consists of a king and drunken elephant, the Kirin and the Phoenix from the last game, and a lioness and a queen. You'll also note that the go-betweens replace the forward units, which were just pawns, and there are no cunning tanuki or treacherous foxes in this game. I will be explaining all of the new movements for the pieces that are new, and I'll give a recap on the movements of the old pieces, but I'll be rushing through those as I already explained them in my last trials video. One other note I want to bring up is you might notice some of these pieces, such as the Dragon Horse, Dragon Knight, and Queen, are promotions from the last game, as the Phoenix promoted to the Queen, the Rook promoted to the Dragon Knight, and the Bishop promoted to the Dragon Horse. This is still the case. The Rook and Bishop both still promote to a Dragon Horse and a Dragon Knight, and the Phoenix to the Queen, but they also are starting pieces in this game. And the reason for that is that there's a convenient theme throughout these games, is that as you learn more pieces, their promotions start being pieces in the starting lineup, and then those pieces promotions begin starting as lineup from other games. And this is the learning curve of this trial system, is that starting from the lower end, you'll be learning about more pieces by learning first about the promotion version of that piece from a different piece, and then learning about the piece itself as a starting piece, which usually ends up having a promotion itself leading into a different piece. I can create these promotion chains where you can start from a gold general to get a rook, to get a dragon knight, to get the soaring eagle. And there's even more after that, but I'm not going to be going into too much detail on pieces that won't be in this game. The only other thing I want to bring up is that there is a new aspect, which is on the lioness, and that is one of the reasons why this trial is called Trial of the Trades. We will begin by giving a recap of the pieces that you already know about from Trial 1, Trial of the Crane. Alright, now that we can go into the new pieces, we'll begin with the go-between. It is a step mover with a simple forward step and backward step. And as you can see from its dots underneath its name, it's in every game from now on out. It is a very common forward unit that takes the front lines for you. And its promotion, the Drunken Elephant, is overall a large buff to its movement. As you can see, it loses its ability to move backwards directly, but it gains the ability to move backwards diagonally, which is generally considered a faster movement to begin with. And if you can get a go-between to the furthest lines, I would recommend it. But as you can see by the starting lineup, it's unlikely given the fact that, well, a go-between needs to get through a go-between and a pawn. And both of these are column locked pieces, meaning that they will always be in your way unless captured. It is just very unlikely to promote your go-between to a drunken elephant, but it is not a bad promotion by any means. Next up, we have the blind tiger. As you can see, it is another step mover. It can step in every direction except directly in front of it. It is overall generally used as a defensive piece that has some attacking potential, especially since it starts one space in front of all your other step movers. But generally, you'd probably want to keep this back to protect either your king or to use as a defensive piece to guard your promotion line. Although if you do get it to the enemy's promotion line, it will promote to the flying stag. Flying stag, it's a lot like the plodding ox in the fact that its column ranges are decently powerful and it controls a large amount of space on its column, but being able to only move one row at a time across in any direction, it has a little more space potential than the plodding ox with its directly sideways movements, but overall, I would say that this promotion is not worth pushing your blind tiger. If you can get your blind tiger there, by all means do it, but the blind tiger is by no means a side quest piece and should not be focused on throughout the game. Next up, we have another general. This one is the silver general. Now, generals can be important for the next game, but I'm not going to go too deep into why that's important now, because you'll learn about that later. The silver general is much like the gold general, except for instead of being very defensive, it's more aggressive. It's actually more like the copper general, but has an overall buff to its backwards movement with its diagonal moves, as diagonal movements are commonly faster but less space taking. And of course, if you promote your silver general, it will become a vertical mover, which we saw the copper general's promotion to a side mover last game, but this promotes to a vertical mover. You'll also might note that the starting lineup of this version, Trial of the Trades, has a side mover and a vertical mover in it. The vertical mover is a good promotion, but again, just like the copper general and gold general, it might be better to keep them as step movers if they're near enough to the king that they can weave a mating net more effectively. Although I don't even know if it should be considered a mating net in this game, as instead of checkmating, you just capture the enemy king. Our next step mover up is the ferocious leopard. You might have in the last game wondered why there was no bishop promotion, and that is because the ferocious leopard's promotion is the bishop, but it was not in the last game. The ferocious leopard holds a decent space, and I would recommend using this as one of your aggressive step movers during the opening and mid game. It's very effective to use this as a space holder from the middle of the board if you can push it past all of your pieces. And I will be describing strategy into this game, as there's a lot more strategy understood about this game, as it is actually based off of a game called Shogi. There's only very small differences between that game and this game. Like I said, Ferocious Leopard promotes to a bishop, and a bishop holds diagonal space with ranges, as you already know. The lance, and you might notice that it's pretty much exactly the same as the ox cart from the previous game, and it is. It has the exact same movements, but its promotion is different. It promotes to a painted horse, which, compared to the plodding ox of the last game, is a big buff. The painted horse has way more dynamic movements, and it has the opportunity to attack similar to how a queen can attack. Its rerouting potential is almost none. It can only move backwards, but its attack is very strong and can devastate enemy lines if you use it properly. And now we will talk about the reverse chariot. This is the piece that starts right above your lance. As you'll note, the starting lineup has a setup for a battery already started. A battery is when you have multiple pieces with the same ranging direction set up. For example, you can note that the bishop and dragon horse have a battery set up on this diagonal. Now, unfortunately for the bishop and dragon horse, this diagonal is not very useful unless the player on the other team pushes both your go-between and their pawn, allowing you to strike at their vertical mover. But even then, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that strategy off the bat, as it has problems, and giving up your dragon horse for a vertical mover is not worth it. Reverse chariot will often be fodder for some of your other pieces to take the flank on the enemy and use that row, that column, to take promotions in the back lines. I will also note that the reverse chariot does promote to a whale. Although this promotion piece is less effective than the painted horse, it does have its uses. It has very good rerouting potential, and if you can get it to the back of the enemy's backlines, you can cause devastation from behind the enemy, which can be another flanking opportunity for you. Although this is dangerous, as it can be trapped a lot more easily than some pieces. Next up, we have the king, which is your royal piece for this game and all the games preceding it until the final trial. It is very simple, moves in every direction with a one-step move, and has the royal aspect, meaning that if it's captured, you lose the game, unless you have another royal piece on your board. It promotes to the mighty king, which simply gains it one-step move in every direction, as it has a limited range of 2 in all directions. Again, it is still royal. Next, we'll be talking about the Drunken Elephant, which is your biggest side quest piece of this game. It has a large potential for the game and is one of the reasons why, instead of trying to checkmate the enemy, you need to capture their royal pieces. That is because the Drunken Elephant, which as a base piece is very simple, it can move in all directions except directly behind it. But its promotion is what makes it unique, because the Drunken Elephant promotes to a prince, which it only ever gains the backwards movement, but gains the royal aspect. The Drunken Elephant promoting to the prince is not something that will actually happen in most games. It's very likely that your Drunken Elephant will either get captured or you'll just never get it to the promotion lines, because it is a step mover and it is very slow. But the thing about the Drunken Elephant is the pressure its promotion can cause on the enemy. Just putting it towards the front of the just putting it towards your front lines or getting it into the middle of the board can tell the enemy, I could move this into your territory and get it promoted. It's not so much a threat of actually getting it promoted. The threat is that if they don't put their attention on the piece, it could devastate their overall setup and cause issues later in the game. But I will say that losing material to get a prince on the board is not worth it, because in the end, the enemy can just capture all of your pieces and then force you to lose by having an abundance of power over you. So I would recommend not actually promoting this piece, but more likely using it as a pressure for the enemy's defenses. Next up, we'll be talking about some strangers. We've got the vertical mover here, which is, of course, the promotion of the silver general, but it is also a starting piece in this game as the vertical mover. It has one-step directionals for changing rows, but its column potential is on one column ranges. If you promote your vertical mover, it turns into the flying ox. Flying ox can move like a queen except for its sideways movement. The flying ox is decently strong. It has a lot of attack potential, and its rerouting potential is not as good as it could be with sideways movements, but diagonal backward movements are good too. You could also think of this as a bishop plus a reverse chariot if you want to think about it in that manner. Next up, we have the side mover. Again, this was the promotion of the copper general that we saw in the last game. Side mover, very simply, has step moves up and down and sideways movements for ranges. It is a very good defensive piece, and I would recommend keeping it in your backline. Although pushing it isn't a bad idea either, because its promotion, the Mighty Boar, is arguably just as strong as the Flying Oxen promotion, which was the vertical mover. The vertical mover promotes much easier, but the Mighty Boar is a strong piece by all means, and I would recommend always promoting to this piece. Next up, we have the Dragon Horse, which, as you can remember, was the promotion of the bishop last time, and still is the bishop's promotion this time. The bishop will always promote to the Dragon Horse. But the Dragon Horse also has a promotion, which we'll be talking about now, and that is the Horned Falcon has a new movement type that we're going to be discussing. That is the railed double move. A railed double move in this manner would be this yellow and green spaces that I've displayed here. The yellow represents it can make an igui eat move here, so it can step into this place to capture a piece and then move right back, or it can make a double capture move where if there was two pieces here, it could capture both of them, landing here for its final movement. The double move, along with the lion's double move that we'll see multiple times. I don't know if I explained this in the last video, but it's relevant in this too, as these pieces can also use this maneuvering fashion, which is the double move to allow them to jump over friendly pieces. So for example, if there was a friendly piece here and an empty space here, it could take a step and then its second step to move over that friendly piece without capturing it. It is not allowed to use that movement potential to capture its own pieces, though. Keep that in mind. Next up, the Dragon Knight, which again, you should know what the Dragon Knight is if you watched the previous video. It is a rook with diagonal movement steps, and this just allows the rook to have a lot more flexibility in its attacking patterns and defensive patterns. Again, the promotion is what we're all here to see, which is the Soaring Eagle. Now, as you see, the Soaring Eagle has queen moves in all directions except diagonally in front of it, where it has the same railed double step moves that the Horned Falcon had, but this is on the diagonals again. Again, igui eat move here, and a double step to double capture or double step to jump over a friendly piece. And now we'll talk about the queen. Now the queen is just like a queen from regular chess. The only thing I think I need to really explain here is you'll note the queen is only in this game and the game after that as a starting piece. Now this might surprise some of you because the queen seems like a piece that should be in all the games, especially if a piece like the go-between is in all the games. But there's actually another piece that will be taking the queen's place later, and that is because the queen has no promotion. lioness, the one and only piece in this game that is only in this game. The lioness has the same movements as the lion from the previous game's promotion of the Kirin. The Kirin, again, here in this game, also promotes to a lion, which means that in this game you could have 2 lions if you count the lioness as a lion. And it has a new, unique aspect. That aspect is trade averse. The lioness moves the same way that the lion did in the previous game. As you can see, it makes an eat move to any of these spaces, or it can take a double step to any of the greens. It could also take a double step to get to a yellow, for example. But I explained the full movements of the lion in the last game. The only thing I really need to explain here is the new aspect called trade averse. This is the symbol for trade averse, and it is only ever found on the lioness. The lioness also does not promote, and as such, this is the final form of the lioness. The trade averse aspect is a complicated one, and one that I will need to give some examples for. So let me bring up a real-life examples.
Now I'm going to explain how the aspect on the lioness called trade averse functions. As you can see, I have a decently mid-game board setup here for both players. It was kind of done at random, so don't expect to look too much into the strategy of this board setup. But the basic premise of trade averse is, first and foremost, the trade averse aspect is only ever found on the lioness. It's the only piece in the entire series of all 8 trials that has the trade averse aspect. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to be referring to the trade averse aspect and the lioness one and the same. If I say the lioness can't be doing this, blah, 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 I'm referring to the fact that it can't do that because of the trade averse add-on. That being said, it's black's turn to move. Perhaps black does something along these lines. Like I've said in the past few examples, is that the double move allows you to jump over one of your friendly pieces as long as you don't land on top of them. Now, in this position, you can note the lioness can capture the enemy lioness. But if it were to do so, this bishop could immediately capture it back. And because of that, that move is illegal. The lioness is not allowed to capture the enemy lioness if doing so would result in, on the next turn, the enemy being able to capture back the lioness. So you can never trade lionesses. And that is at the core concept of the entire rule. That is what trade averse is referring to. You cannot trade pieces that have the trade averse aspect. Now, like I said, the lioness is the only piece with the trade averse aspect. But for example, let's say that white does this. It's not necessarily a good move or anything, but I'm just going to do it for an example. The lioness on black's team now also cannot capture the enemy lioness because it's, again, protected by this pawn and protected by their drunken elephant. For example, if it's black's turn to move, the obvious choice would be to make sure that they don't get taken by this blind tiger. Now, don't ask me how this position came about. It's irrelevant to the situation. The bishop can capture the enemy lioness. But if it did so, it would allow this rook to capture your lioness. And that is a trade of lionesses, which is not allowed, meaning that the pieces are not allowed to do that. But which piece was not allowed to move? It's this bishop right off the bat. You cannot capture the enemy lioness if, by doing so, it would cause your lioness to be able to be captured on the next turn. That is the basic rule of the trade averse add-on. You can never make a move if on the next move the enemy can capture your lioness, if that move captures a lioness. Hopefully this made sense. It is by far the most complicated aspect. Every other aspect is easy to understand, but this one is slightly complicated. It's time we talk about some strategy for this trial. First thing I want to explain is a bit of the opening theory. For this game, more than the others, there is a defined strategy for the opening. The main goal is to get your step movers towards the back into the mid board and put more pressure on both flanks, or maybe focus on one flank, because one of the biggest ways that you can attack your enemy is using this right flank or this left flank, because of how many powerful orthogonal movers you can set up here. For example, a decent start would probably be something along these lines. As you can see, in just 3 moves, I've already gotten set up a battery of 3 pieces that can run down this flank. Now, obviously, the pawn is in the way, and your side mover is also in the way. But after just a few moves, you can get to the point where you trade off their pawns, and you can start infiltrating. And unless the enemy does something to back up their defenses or bolster their defenses, this attack will succeed, and it could cause you to be up in promotion and tempo. And let me start explaining what tempo is, because I've said the word a few times, but basically the idea behind tempo is that if you can do something faster than your opponent, you've gained tempo. So let's say in the first few turns, the opponent moves a pawn out, you move this pawn out, and then they immediately bring their queen to the battlefield. You can then bring your dragon horse here and force the queen to move out or further into the battlefield. Now, if they move further into the battlefield, it's not a good move for the enemy. Honestly speaking, bringing out your strongest ranging and stranging pieces just immediately is not recommended in this version, because getting a strong bolstered defense with step movers is more important. Shuffling your pieces to the point where your castle is unbreakable is much better than trying to attack immediately. If one player goes fully into defense and bolstering their defenses, and the other player goes into attack, the player that built their strong defense can easily transition into an attack faster than the opponent can transition into defense, because they already brought all their strong pieces forward, and the defending player will quickly transition into attack, pick off the pieces, take space, and start promoting just so much more efficiently than the enemy. Now, this is not to say you should defend yourself, or this is not to say that you can't attack in the opening or can't use strong ranging moves to force the opponent to do things. But in this example, like I've shown, the queen moving forward to this space and then having to move back is what I would call a tempo loss. The white player has lost tempo here because they spent 2 moves doing nothing. And although this is not necessarily the most effective of positioning for your dragon horse, you can easily move this like this and then begin building a defensive stronghold right here. I wouldn't recommend that move. I would want to be able to retreat my dragon horse if necessary. So perhaps something along these lines would be better. Now, I've talked about a few times how you should be able to move your step movers to the front. Well, how does that actually function in the game? Let me give a few basic tips for how you can move your step movers to the front effectively without despising your own defense in the same manner. A few tips right off the bat is that using these spaces effectively is important, and also knowing what pieces you want to put in the front is also important. For example, I am more likely to use the Ferocious Leopard and the Silver General to push than my Gold General, because I like to keep my Gold Generals towards the back to defend. But there are other situations where you might want to use your Gold General. Also, I would recommend using the Blind Tiger for attack, because its effective defense is behind it. So keeping it towards at least the midboard can be effective for backing up if you need to defend something with. The other thing I like to do is, for example, in a beginning, immediately move my Blind Tiger and then bring my Drunken Elephant right off the bat. Because the further your Drunken Elephant gets towards the front, the more strong it is. Also, although I'd recommend protecting it, if you find a trade, for example, if their enemy's Dragon Knight is searching down on your Drunken Elephant, but you have a piece defending it, I'd make that trade. Any day of the year, I'd trade a Drunken Elephant for a Dragon Knight. Yes, the Drunken Elephant's promotion is very powerful, but trading it for a Dragon Knight is worth it every day of the year. I'd even trade it for a Bishop, honestly, because yes, the Drunken Elephant's promotion is strong, but realistically speaking, you're going to do more sacrificing trying to keep it alive than if you just trade off a more powerful piece for it. Now, a few opening strategies. Like I said earlier, this is an effective way to get a nice battery off the bat, but a stronger battery would be something along these lines, where we begin moving forward, maybe bring some of our step movers in the same vein, Now, something I'm going to do here is move my reverse chariot forward so that the weaker promotion is behind or is in front of the stronger promotion. That way, if a trade sequence happens, I would trade off a piece that promotes to this before I would trade off a piece that promotes to this. Now, that might not seem like much of a difference for now if they're both getting traded, but for example, you could pick which one of these pieces gets promoted last and stays alive. I think we can all agree this one is the superior one. It has the same movements as both of these pieces combined. It's a stronger promotion. And that is the goal when you build a battery on these flanks, is to try to put your pieces that are strongest at the last. So if you can theoretically get step movers towards the front, for example, let me reset this quick. For example, if you were able to bring a piece in this manner, now your copper general is towards the front, and perhaps you can bring your dragon knight in this manner to protect this pawn. Now, obviously, in the end, that rook movement was not effective by most people's standards, as I had to spend 3 moves moving a rook into this position. There are better ways to do it, but for the sake of example, you can see how I've built a 4-piece battery, and I have a copper general supporting this initial pawn right off the bat. It also protects this pawn, and my dragon horse protects this pawn. Otherwise, if my copper general and pawn both get traded, I have a dragon horse on this diagonal, and I have quick backup with this dragon knight on these angles here. I also have a queen here on this diagonal that would take 2 moves to bring into the fight, but if I have time for it, that could be effective as well. I also have a good area here built up that I can quickly advance my other step movers into the fight with if necessary. Now, before I initiate this attack, I would recommend, first of all, noticing what your enemy has done. As you can see, I've gotten halfway across the board right now. I haven't reached into the enemy's technical territory yet, especially since I haven't gotten anywhere near the promotion line. But there is a good chance that your enemy will be doing something similar and trying to take space as well, which is why doing something like this might be a little bit misleading, because it is not as easy to build something like this, a 4-piece battery, when your opponent is actively trying to stop you from building these batteries. A 3-piece battery is easy to get, but you want to initiate it in a way that is effective for you. And before you start making trades, make sure you realize, is this trade sequence going to benefit me? For example, let's say the enemy got into the place where it was like this. It has a 3-piece battery, I have a 4-piece battery. If I move my pawn here, they will take, I can take, they can take, I can take, they can take, I can take, they can take, and I can take. After all those trades are said and done, vertical movers, reverse chariots, lances, and pawns. We traded the same amount of pieces and are in a different situation, yes, but is this situation even advantageous for me? I have a rook on this file, but although right now I could promote in this space, it's the enemy's turn. And a simple move like that immediately locks down the position. Now, what am I to do with my rook? I can't capture this piece because it'll be taken by the ferocious leopard. I can't move past the piece. Even if I could, I would get captured here by the side mover itself. If I go here, the side mover will capture me, or the rook could capture me. And if I go here, the bishop can capture me. This position is already locked down. But this is an advantage for me in this situation, because remember, I can bring backup. Bring the dragon knight, perhaps even bringing the queen. And you can keep marching off this position. And this weakness that the enemy has, where they're using 3, even 4, if you consider that rook being a crucial part of that defense, pieces to lock down this section of the board. And unless they're fast enough on this section to push into me, I can quickly take advantage of this position the enemy's in. Now, that's not to say I need to right away, But for example, even just a 2-move sequence like this to bring my bishop into the fight immediately puts pressure on this pawn and is a I mean, if I capture this pawn, my bishop promotes and that rook is in danger. That rook would be in danger even if it didn't promote. But the point is, you see how positions like this, that although yes, you traded the same amount of pieces and in the end you did not allow any promotions, that sequence is better for black. And black has a stronger position right now. Now, to be fair, in white's defense, I didn't move any of white's pieces. So it's kind of unfair to say that white has a disadvantage here, because of course white has a disadvantage here. I played like 12 moves, maybe even 20 moves with black and didn't do anything with white. So of course black has a stronger position. But you can see how building up these batteries, and like I see, I already have another 3-piece battery right here ready. If I made a move with my lioness, I could even bring another dragon knight here. Maybe even bring the other rook. But the basic premise of this strategy section is just to explain that bringing your step movers and bringing a strong defense up is most important first. Moving your pawns and moving your step movers along with the pawns to keep defending them. For example, this pawn is protected if I move it here, but it would not be protected if I move it here. So perhaps my next move would be to do this, and then perhaps something along these lines, and then these lines, so that I can move this here, still protected, and then finally I can move my pawn here. And if they capture, I can capture back with my copper general. And my copper general is still safe because there is nothing that they can attack with. If they put pressure on it on the next move, I have it protected with my dragon knight. So what? You gonna trade your rook for my copper general? Because I don't think most players would do that. You could then do this to put a second piece pressure on it. Now perhaps I can do this. And that's basically how this game functions. It's similar to chess in that a lot of times you'll just stack attack after attack after attack on one space.
Just a few other things I'd like to clear up before I finish this video. The promotion line for this game is, again, in front of your pawn line. So passing into your promotion line will allow your enemy to promote. And the promotion line is 1 space forward from the last game. And that's because your pawns start 1 space forward. This is just helpful to keep in mind, but as the boards get larger, the general idea is that you will have 3 sections of the board. You'll have your promotion area, the center of the board, and the enemies. All things considered, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you'll tune in for the next trial, which will be the trial of the trumpet. Thank you for watching.